Order. Could I call the committee to order and welcome the Home Secretary for her normal appearance before the Select Committee when we look at the work of her office and what she is doing. For those who expected the Home Secretary at 4:30, we've reorganised the time. I understand that you're off to the Vatican to see the Pope, Home Secretary.
I am indeed, Chairman.
Well, we were very happy to reorganise for that purpose.
From Keith Vaz to the Pope.
Step downhill.
He probably believes so.
Anyway, I was going to pray for you as a good Catholic, but I'm sure you can make it on your own. Thank you for coming. The way we've structured this session, to give it a little more structure, is that the first half an hour we'll concentrate on policing, the second half an hour on immigration and nationality, the next half an hour we will look at terrorism, and then we will look at JHA and international issues. And we hope to have you away as promised by 4:30, if not before. Were you as surprised and amazed as some of us were at the news that Steve Williams, the chairman of the Police Federation and the General Secretary, had decided to retire as soon as the annual conference was over? Or did you know that this was going to happen?
No, Chairman, I was sorry to hear of Steve Williams going. I've spoken to him today about his decision to go. I think he has done a very important job in his time as Chairman of the Police Federation. I think being willing to initiate the Normington Review, which, as we know, brought a whole series of recommendations forward and shone a lot light on certain aspects of the operation of the Police Federation that I think was important. And I think Steve Williams has done a very good job in bringing that forward and steering that to the point that it is at the moment. So I was sorry to hear him say that he would be stepping down. Obviously, Ian Rennie has also said that he would be stepping down. But I think that what's important for the Federation is that they elect a new chairman who is able to take, as Steve Williams himself has said, take that work forward.
I too have spoken to him, and I expressed a view that I thought that he should stay on after the conference. Do you think that if he stayed on, it would provide better continuity? Because, as you've just said, you paid tribute to him for starting the reform process. Do you not think it would be better to have a continuation of the leadership of the Federation? Ultimately, it's his decision and not yours, but that little continuation might be helpful given the turmoil that the Federation has been through.
Well, obviously, I had expected that Steve would be carrying on and therefore would be taking the work that he'd initiated forward to the next stage. It is, as you say, Chairman, for him to decide what he wishes to do, and he is the best judge of what he feels is right both for himself but also for the Federation. So, as I say, I think the important thing is, in looking at the future, that the Federation sees the need to elect a chairman who is going to take that work forward. They have been, the Normington Review has challenged the Federation in quite a number of areas with its many recommendations. But I think it is important, particularly given what the Normington Review discovered and issues around confidence in the Police Federation, that work is taken forward.
We have just released onto our website some correspondence that we had been sent from Fiona McElvey, one of the witnesses before the committee, who had been the press officer, Director of Communications. And amongst those documents is an email that Mr. Williams had sent to other members of his committee, in which he says in one of the paragraphs, whilst accepting emotions are running high in the advent of inevitable change, at times I have genuinely felt that I have been gratuitously and cruelly bullied and humiliated. I was pretty shocked to read that sentence, that the chairman of the Police Federation should have felt that while doing his job and initiating a reform that Parliament and indeed you support, that he felt that he was being bullied and humiliated by other police officers on that committee.
Well, Chairman,
you may not have seen it.
I was going to say, no. I haven't had an opportunity to look at this exchange, which, from the description, I assume is an internal exchange within the Police Federation. what I would say is that I would have hoped that the chairman would have had the full support of the Federation, given what the Normington Review showed about the Federation, given particularly the significant number of officers that it suggested, and that the work that was done around it suggested, felt there should be need for change within the Federation.
I would have felt that he would have... surprise you? That the chairman of the Police Federation should feel himself being cruelly bullied. The chairman of the Police Federation of England and Wales being cruelly bullied by other people in his organisation.
I would hope and expect, Chairman, that the chairman of the Police Federation, having been duly elected from within the Police Federation, would have been able to rely on the respect and support of members of the Federation. Obviously, we all know in any organisation, decisions come up on which people take different views as to the right way forward. But hopefully then collectively they will rally round a decision that's been taken.
Sure, but some of these people are going to be involved in electing his successor. Steve Williams and Ian Rennie just going does not solve the problem, does it? Would you favour the election of the chairman, as Sir David Normington has said, by all members of the Police Federation, rather than a committee of 30, some of whom have been involved in gratuitously and cruelly bullying and humiliating their chairman? Wouldn't it be better to extend the franchise, as Sir David has suggested?
Well, I think what is important for the next stage, because obviously election will take place now at around the time of the conference, which is in less than 2 months' time, is that people see and recognise the importance of electing a chairman who will take forward the recommendations of the Normington Review and will take forward the changes that are necessary. As I say, I haven't seen the exchange of emails. I am concerned about the sort of language that you have quoted to me within that. But I would say, I think that what we are seeing is that, and what we saw from the Normington Review, is a very real need for major change within the Federation if it is able to move forward with the confidence that it would hope to have, with people able to have the confidence in it that it would expect.
It's just that we've heard some of these adjectives before when Andrew Mitchell gave evidence about his treatment by members of the Police Federation. He used some of this language, that he felt that he was being humiliated and bullied.
Well, I think what we saw from the Normington Review was that there was a very real need to change the culture within the Federation.
Mark Reckless.
In the resignation letter Mr. Williams initially drafted, I'd just like to read you a passage. He says, "The behaviour from some," that's his Joint Central Committee colleagues, recently directed publicly and critically towards me, in my opinion, is totally unacceptable, and for me personally, a straw that edged on breaking the camel's back. We all saw what happened to our friend and colleague, Paul McKeever, and with a young family, I do not intend to let the same thing happen to me. I know some of you have described what is happening as venting the spleen exercises or a little bit of bloodletting, but it is simply wrong. Isn't this just so serious that it cannot be business as usual, and we cannot simply rely on these 30 members referred to, at least in part there, to take this organisation forward?
Well, as I've indicated in my earlier responses, I would hope and expect that the members of the Police Federation will recognise the need for root and branch change, which the Normington Review identified within the Federation. I think people, when looking at the Police Federation, would expect, yes, sometimes there will be discussions about topics on which decisions have to be taken, and people sometimes have different views. There is no excuse for, however, taking that to a point where people feel personally that their situation is such that they're not able to continue. But I think what is important is that the review has been set in hand, and from a number of issues that have come forward around the review and other issues, such as the chairman has referred to in relation to the dealings and the treatment of Andrew Mitchell, that people will see that the Federation, if it is to have the confidence of the public and indeed confidence of officers, actually needs a significant change, a root and branch change. That is what I look to the Federation to accept and to take forward.
I know that in the normal course of events you wouldn't want to intervene in Police Federation matters, but given how serious this has now become, Steve Williams says, "I'm acutely aware that as an organisation, with all that we are facing, now is not the time to change the leadership. as it would be particularly damaging to do so. In light of that, do you not think it would be appropriate for you as Home Secretary to...
Sorry, Home Secretary, I'm just handing you what Mr. Reckless is asking you questions about.
Right, thank you. Yes, this is not a letter. This particular letter is not the one that I...
Just to go again, he says, I'm acutely aware that as an organisation, with all that we're now facing, now is not the time to change the leadership, as it would be particularly damaging to do so. Is there not a public interest in Mr. Williams rescinding that investigation and staying on to lead the organisation through with the Normington reforms, rather than allowing various elements of this joint central committee to stop the organisation doing that?
Well, I think what is important, Mr. Reckless, is that Steve Williams has made a decision that he believes is right for himself and for the Police Federation. Obviously, as I said, I had spoken to him earlier today. My view is that I hope that the Federation will recognise the importance of taking forward the reforms that have been identified by the Normington Review. And obviously, the reference is made in this particular letter. This, of course, I think you referred to it as a resignation letter. It's not a resignation letter, of course. This is a letter that was sent, as I see from the date at the beginning, a couple of months ago. It's described as
his initial... it was drafted as a resignation letter initially, so it's an early draft of that, yes.
Well, it's identified as a message to Joint Control Committee colleagues from the chairman. So obviously I assume it was an internal letter within the Police Federation.
I believe Fiona McElroy, our witness, described it to us as a draft of his resignation letter.
Well, I'm not able to comment on that because obviously she was presumably at the time an employee of the Police Federation and has subsequently made these available to you. I don't think it's appropriate for me to comment on the status or otherwise of internal documents that were between members of the Police Federation.
And could I ask you about a separate thing, which I think will be less controversial, at least factually. But we had from the Treasurer of the Police Federation, we've been provided with a letter from the Treasurer to all the regional treasurers demanding audit and proper control of the number 2 accounts. And within that, he says, you should also be aware that the Secretary of State has the power to ask to see all Federation accounts. Have you done so with respect to those number 2 accounts?
At this stage, the I have not exercised any of the powers that are available to me as Secretary of State. As I have indicated in a number of previous answers, I trust that the Federation is going to respond to the requirements that have been made on it by the Normington Review and in response to issues that have arisen from the Normington Review. And obviously we will see how those matters transpire in the coming weeks in the lead-up and during their conference at which certain decisions will be taken.
Thank you. Given that the Treasurer of the Police Federation said that all those accounts should be made available to both the JCC and the relevant Chief Constables by the 1st of March, but that does not appear to have happened. Is it not now the time for you as Home Secretary to make use of your backstop powers?
Well, I think what is important, Mr. Reckless, is I think the aim that we all have is a police federation which is operating with the full confidence of the officers and in which the public can have confidence. And there are matters that have been raised within the Police Federation which obviously need to be addressed. I wait to see how some of those issues will be addressed in the coming weeks. Obviously, there are certain powers that the Secretary of State has, but at this stage, I think I am looking to the Federation, and I trust that they will recognise the degree of concern that has been expressed by people and by their own members in some aspects in relation to the work of the Federation, and therefore take the appropriate action, and the action that's right and proper and that we would consider to be such.
Thank you. Mr. Ellis.
Home Secretary, do you think that there's any sign of a new broom likely now in the Police Federation? Or is it not the case that the old guard, as highlighted by Sir David Normington, are not only still very much there, but may well have been responsible for the ousting of Mr. Williams, especially with reference to the reference I think the chairman referred to about bullying? Are they not possibly pulling up the drawbridge and throwing detractors off the balustrade? Isn't this what possibly is happening in the Police Federation right now?
I think, obviously, as I've indicated, I'm sorry that Steve Williams is going because I'd hoped he would take the changes through. I think we cannot say what is finally going to happen in relation to those changes until the Federation themselves vote in relation to those changes and decide the chairman that they're going to elect to take any changes forward. So I think it is important that we wait. Obviously, the Federation has an important few weeks ahead of it in terms of decisions about its future. I hope that all the members who have responsibility for the various decisions that have to be taken will recognise that if the Police Federation is to be a body which people generally can feel that they have confidence in, that the confidence in this body has been significantly damaged as a result of the Normington Review and some other events that have taken place. And I would hope that the officers within the Federation and those, as I say, with responsibility for making these decisions will understand that and take forward the proposals from the Normington Review accordingly.
I think Sir David Normington's report referred to a failure on the part of many of the Police Federation branches to supply the accounts, or their accounts. And he was guessing educated guess about a figure of tens of millions of pounds that may be in those accounts. So do you reserve the right, if as Home Secretary, to demand access to Treasury accounts from the Police Federation if they're not forthcoming, if there's a failure to comply with requests? They have only been requests, they're not enforceable by law. But if you have those powers, do you reserve the right to use them?
Well, I have. There are certain powers that are available to the Secretary of State in relation to the operation of the certain matters relating to the Police Federation. As I've said and indicated in response to Mr. Reckless and to other questions and to your earlier question, Mr. Ellis, I am obviously watching to see what steps the Police Federation will be taking over the coming weeks. I think it's important, and I would hope that they themselves would see the necessity of restoring confidence in the Federation. I'm sure that there are those, not just outside this organisation, but also officers within the organisation who were surprised to see the financial revelations in the Normington Review in relation to some of the accounts of the branches, and potentially, as you've indicated, estimates were only possible, potentially the sums of money that were involved.
In all the circumstances, and in view of other matters that have come to the public's attention and your attention that have cast doubts on the situation as far as the police are concerned, do you consider any possibility of broadening the scope of the public inquiry that you announced in the Chamber of the House of Commons that you'd be undertaking? I think with reference to that public inquiry, specifically in relation to the Stephen Lawrence case, correct me if I'm wrong, but do you think there is a possibility of broadening the scope of it to encompass policing more generally?
Well, I think one of the things that I also indicated in the House of Commons is that we will be looking, obviously, at the further review that Mark Ellison brings forward, and that will help us to scope what the terms of inquiry of that public inquiry should be, the terms of reference of that public inquiry should be. So I haven't set the terms of reference at this stage. Right. I think we will be helped in setting those by the further work that Mark Ellison is doing as a result of certain of the findings of his own initial report. So
if Ellison comes back with his review and recommends a wider scope, you're open to that such a suggestion?
As I say, I haven't set the terms of reference at this stage. I think it's right to wait and see what Mark Ellison comes forward with.
Let us conclude on the Police Federation section. Did you, in your conversation with Steve Williams, ask him to stay on?
No, Chairman. It was a private conversation, but no, I didn't ask him to stay on because I feel in circumstances like this that if an individual has taken, in his position, has taken that decision for the reasons that he feels are appropriate in relation to himself and the Police Federation and has made that public, it's not for me or anybody else to try and force somebody else in any sense an individual to take a different decision.
Well,
I indicated that
yes.
I was very sorry to see him go. I think he has played an invaluable role as chairman of the Police Federation. I think the fact that he was prepared to initiate the review...
Sure. Yes,
so
you said that. But just on this point, you didn't ask him to stay and see this all through?
No, I didn't, because I didn't think it was appropriate for me to do so.
Obviously, you hadn't seen the memo that had been sent out. I think this whole committee is deeply concerned about the language that has been used. When the chairman of the Police Federation says that he's been cruelly bullied and that he's been humiliated by colleagues sitting on the very committee that is going to elect his successor, this is a matter for real worry. But you have said you will not use your powers, which you have, until after the Police Federation have looked at the reforms, made their own decision, and then you will see what needs to be done. But at the moment you're putting it right in their hands and saying they have to make their decisions, and you would like to see Normington implemented in full.
I would like to see the Normington Review recommendations implemented and I would hope in full. I would hope that the Police Federation themselves will see the importance of doing that. The language, if I could return to the internal documents from the Police Federation, which have been made available to the Home Affairs Select Committee and which the committee has now made public. Obviously, certain language has been used in relation to that. One of the issues that I think the Normington Review identified clearly was a question of the culture of the organisation of the Police Federation, and I think people see that issue quite clearly.
Indeed, endorsed by the chairman himself. Let us move on to other issues. Are you now in favour of using water cannon on the streets of this country?
I have not taken a decision about water cannon, Chairman. It is relatively recently that I've received letters both from the Mayor of London and also from David Shaw as the Chief Constable responsible for this particular issue within the Chief Constable's Council, and I'm obviously looking at all the reports that have been put together in relation to water cannon, at the case that's been put forward, and of course they've also received representations from those who do not wish to see water cannon.
So that means no, you haven't made a decision.
I haven't made a decision.
David Winnick. And then
Home Secretary, in 2010, you made a statement, which obviously you'll remember. You said, I quote, "I do not think that anybody wants to see water cannon used on the streets of Britain. As I said in my statement, if a right honourable gentleman heard me, we have a different attitude to the culture of policing here in the UK. We police by consent, and that depends on trust between the police and the public." Do you continue to stand by those remarks?
Well, I continue to believe that the British model of policing, which is policing by consent, is an important one. It is one which is recognised around the world. But what I have also said and made clear is that I think it is important that the police have available to them the tools that they believe they need in order to be able to undertake their role. So I will be looking at the issue of water cannon accordingly in the light of the business case and the papers that come before me, conscious that this is an issue on which there are some very deeply divided views, and as has been made evident by the representations that have been made.
One incident which occurred in Germany, as I understand it this year, because the report was in the Huffington Post, the 18th of February 2014, and it said that the use of water cannon in Stuttgart led to a situation where a person, Dietrich Wagner, was blinded by being hit full in the face by a water cannon at an environmental protest in that city. Are you aware of that incident?
I am aware of that incident, obviously as part of the process.
Yes, that particular incident. Home Secretary, are you aware of it?
I am aware of that incident, Mr. Winnick, but if I may go on to explain that as part of the process of looking at the question of whether or not any particular new piece of equipment can be used by the police, then there has to be an assessment in relation to certain medical aspects of that and the impact that the use of that equipment will have on individuals, and obviously that is one of the issues I will have to look at in coming to my decision.
Of course, we don't have to go as far as Germany. Water cannon, has been used in a part of the United Kingdom where there's been so much trouble even now, but even more so as we all are tragically aware in Northern Ireland. The general consensus, I'm not sure if this is more a question to you. The general consensus, and therefore the question is whether you share that view, is that it hasn't done anything to help the situation, and very often has escalated the protest on the streets. Do you feel there's any justification for that conclusion?
Well, I think if you were to talk to people in Northern Ireland about the use of water cannon in Northern Ireland, you would doubtless find different views as to the efficacy of the use of water cannon. Obviously, the fact that PSNI continue to maintain the ability to use water cannon, and they have been used on the streets of Northern Ireland, suggests that they do believe it is efficacious in certain circumstances. Obviously, water cannon are only suitable in certain circumstances to be used. They don't suit every set of circumstances in which there are questions, problems arising around public order. But those aspects are what I will need to look at as I look at the decision, which, of course, from the Home Secretary's point of view, is a decision as to whether a piece of equipment is authorised. It's not about whether a piece of equipment is going to be used, because that is then a Chief Constable's decision. But as I indicated in my answer to your previous question, one of the assessment processes that takes place is by the Scientific Advisory Committee on the medical implications of less lethal weapons, and they will have made a medical assessment of the use of water cannon, and that will be part of the advice that I will be looking at.
But even going nearer home than Northern Ireland, the disturbances which we all remember 2011, has anyone really suggested that dealing with such acts of hooliganism and antisocial behaviour, rioting, the burning of the building in Croydon, which the committee visited the site, the furniture shop, you remember, Chair.
Indeed.
Has anyone suggested that using water cannon at the time would have helped the situation in any way whatsoever?
Well, as I've just indicated, Mr. Winnick, there are certain circumstances in which it's possible to use water cannon, and there are other circumstances, public order circumstances, in which water cannon are not either physically able to be used or will not have the same sort of impact. So the situation where you've got small groups running around is not one in which you would expect, as I understand it, water cannon to be used. There are other circumstances in public order policing where water cannon are used in other places, such as obviously in Northern Ireland and elsewhere and in places on the continent, where it's a different circumstance. So I don't think anybody has ever suggested that water cannon are the piece of equipment that will be used or should be used in every single public order case. That is not the case.
But I take that really to be a no, whether it would have in any way helped the situation, but you haven't actually said no, but I've interpreted it as such. The Greater London Assembly's Police and Crime Committee had a report, which no doubt you're aware of, Water Cannon, Why the Met's Case Doesn't Wash. And that committee, the Greater London Assembly Police and Crime Committee, I think unanimously all parties came to the conclusion that using water cannon in the city, in London as a whole, would not be helpful.
I'm aware of that report, and that will be part of the consideration.
Thank you.
Representations that I consider.
Thank you, Dr. Huppard, and then Mr. Ellis on water cannon.
Thank you, Chair. Home Secretary, I think many of us hope that you will stick by your comments after the 2011 riots, where you said the way we police in Britain is not through use of water cannon. I realise you'll still make a decision, but I hope you will take that. And indeed, the Commissioner said at the time that they are not the answer. Chief Constable David Shaw, who you referred to, has said that the use feels very un-British. Indeed, this Select Committee, after a riot, said it would have been inappropriate as well as dangerous to have employed water cannon. We agree with our witnesses, including senior police officers, that such use could have escalated and inflamed the situation further. So I hope you will look at those views and stick to them in your decision-making. But I've been trying to get information about the decision, about things like the cost of the water cannons. And I tabled a whole series of parliamentary questions, one of which answered yesterday, column 120W, to ask what estimate you've made of the cost of one water cannon. And the Police Minister didn't answer and simply said that you are considering the request for use and will announce your decision in due course. Could you share with the committee things like what you think the cost of a water cannon would be, the annual storage costs, the annual maintenance costs?
I'm not in a position at this stage, Chairman, to be able to give that detailed response to you. I will be looking at the advice that I received, which will cover a range of issues. Obviously, the business case in terms of the use of water cannon has to be put clearly by the police, but as I've just indicated, representations from those who take a different view about the use of water cannon will also be part of my considerations. And while I recognise that references have been made to whether or not water cannon would have been useful in the riots, I think I'm right in also saying I apologise because I don't have the quote, that HMIC, following the look that it took about public order policing after the riots, did indicate that they thought that water cannon should be looked at.
I'm just trying to understand. I appreciate there are people with different opinions about water cannon. I mean, there seems to be more on one side of the argument than the other, but surely that is a separate question from whether you can say how much it would cost to have a water cannon. You know, that is surely an estimate that you could make, that you could share with this committee, regardless of whether or not you think it's a good idea, or regardless of whether people have differing opinions on it.
Well, the cost of a water cannon would obviously be an aspect that would be considered by any police force. Should water cannon be authorised for use, a police force would have to look at the cost in part of their decision as to whether or not they were going to acquire a water cannon. It's not the issue, I think, primarily that is there for the Secretary of State to take in relation to water cannon is to look at the efficacy of this, as indeed has been done in the past by previous Home Secretaries on other non-lethal weapons. The evaluation and assessment will have a needs analysis, it will look at the technicalities, the operational requirement, the medical assessment, as I've already indicated, and whether or not this is a piece of equipment that would be of value to the police to have at their disposal.
But I appreciate that this is information that you will have to make a decision. But presumably you would want the committee and parliamentarians to be able to be well informed about such decisions. And for example, one of my other questions was about what assessment you've made of the potential of water cannon to cause injury. It would be helpful to have that factual information so that we can have a look. I mean, you presumably would want this committee to advise you on what your decision might be.
The role of the Home Affairs Select Committee, Dr. Huppert, as far as I'm aware, is not to advise the Home Secretary on her decisions. The Home Affairs Select Committee may choose to question the Home Secretary on her decisions and indeed to comment on the Home Secretary's decisions, and in advance may choose in itself to make its own views felt. But I'm not aware that your committee is my advisory committee.
So would you at least make this information available when you make your decision?
I will be making a decision, and when I make the decision, I will make appropriate information available, which indicates why I have taken the decision that I have taken.
To be fair to Dr. Huppert,
when I take it,
he is the coalition spokesman for the Liberal Democrat Party on home affairs issues. So maybe we can't advise you, but I'm sure you'd want to listen carefully to what Dr. Huppert says on these issues.
I can also remind you, Chairman, that there is a Liberal Democrat minister within the Home Office, and he and I discuss and will discuss these.
I'm sure you will. Mr. Ellis?
Just briefly, Home Secretary, on this issue of water cannon. Presumably the police will be a major factor in your consideration in this matter in due course. And is it effectively a matter that for the police to ask you for the tools that they feel that they need, and to be able, what's more, to justify such a piece of equipment on the streets of London?
It is. The process is that if the police believe that there is a piece of equipment that would be valuable to them, would be useful to them, that they then put a case together, and that then comes to the Home Secretary. The Home Secretary's authorisation is an authorisation to use such a piece of equipment, not a decision that it be used or that it be purchased.
That would be operational.
There's an operational decision to be taken beyond that. But it's exactly the same process as went through, for example, for tasers, where the Home Secretary and the Home Office obviously went through, there was an assessment process, a decision was taken as to whether this was a piece of equipment that should be available to the police, and then individual forces took that operational decision themselves.
I think it's fair to say, isn't it, that water cannon is something of an alien concept for British policing. And do you consider I want to say watermark, but do you consider the bar for such decisions to be really set quite high in order to satisfy you? Or is this a 51-49% type of parameter. Sorry to...
Not having looked at all the evidence that has been brought before me yet, because it has only recently been put together. What I would say to you, Mr. Ellis, is obviously I've made, as Mr. Winnick has indicated, I've made comments myself about the British model of policing in the past. Water cannon has not traditionally been part on the British mainland of our approach in relation to this. But I think it is right that when the police come and say that they believe perhaps that circumstances have changed and a particular piece of equipment is something that they feel would be beneficial, that's obviously looked at properly in the normal way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just completing the policing section, we had evidence from Sir Bernard Hope and Howe following the Ellison report. We were very concerned about the shredding of documents at Scotland Yard. I've not yet received, though just before you sat down, I received a letter from Craig Mackay saying that he would not be able to meet the committee's deadline for our requests for the reports into Tiberius, Russell and Athona. Have you or your officials received copies of these reports? And do you know, or do you have any indication as to who might have shredded these documents over the 2 days that were mentioned by Mr. Ellison?
I have not seen the reports, Chairman, but what I have done is asked both the Chief Inspector of Constabulary, Tom Windsor, and Mark Ellison in his further review. The Chief Inspector, obviously HMIC, are looking at the various aspects in relation to the capabilities of police forces to deal with corruption. I have asked both of those to ensure that they consider the reports fully in taking forward their work. And Mark Ellison has indicated to me that he will indeed, he's already replied to me, he's indicated that he will indeed be doing that, and as I understand it, has already been in touch with the Metropolitan Police about this.
The issue of shredding of documents on a corruption case, which cost the taxpayer about 7.8 million, that must cause you concern that these documents were just shredded. Nobody knows who gave the order to shred these documents, where the shredding took place, and how many documents were shredded.
Indeed, Chairman. I mean, that was, as I indicated, this is one of the aspects that I think people were deeply concerned about. When I made my statement in relation to the Ellison review, I think there were some appalling features of the way in which these whole matters had been dealt with that came out as a result of that review. As I understand it, obviously efforts are being made to ascertain more information about the shredding, about why it happened. And as I said, I think what's important is that we make sure that the reports that are available in relation to corruption are properly looked at by those who have now been tasked with that responsibility of looking, in HMIC's part, at more widely at corruption, the ability of police forces to deal with corruption.
But we do need to know which was the commissioner under whose watch this shredding took place. Somebody must have given the order, because we can't believe that routinely the police would start shredding documents.
Well, that is a matter that obviously has to be looked into in terms of the circumstances around it. I don't know the circumstances of that, and as you indicate, Chairman, this is something that I think people don't know or don't understand fully exactly how this took place.
Exactly. Nicola Blackwood and then David Winnick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think one of the issues of concern is the way in which the 2012 review in the Met didn't mention the shredding or the missing material for Operation Athona. And we obviously had a similar problem with the report that came out in other forces, with the Andrew Mitchell case where the final report was altered. And I'm just wondering if you're confident that the strengthening of powers that you've given to the IPCC will deal with this apparent problem with police forces doing reviews and having full confidence from the public in those reviews, or whether you think that more changes need to be made, maybe the College of Policing to bring out some clear guidance or training, or if there are other steps that need to be taken, because clearly this is undermining public confidence in the police to be able to essentially investigate themselves.
I think, in relation to the particular investigation that took place in 2012, obviously, as you say, it's of concern that it didn't appear to find all the evidence that would have been helpful. That's why I think it's important. That's why I have written to both the Chief Inspector and to Mark Ellison to make sure that they are able to have access, are going to look into all of the reports that are available from the Metropolitan Police in relation to corruption. As regards the IPCC, obviously we have taken a number of steps already to enhance the ability of the IPCC to deal with cases, obviously serious and sensitive cases of complaints against the police, such that the police are no longer investigating themselves in so many cases. The movement of resources, the building up of IPCC capability has started in that arena. There is, I think in the not in the longer term, but there are obviously issues arising as we go through some of these cases, which do relate to the College of Policing and training, but more than that. The College of Policing has, of course, issued a draft code of ethics and will be finalising that code of ethics. And I think these are important steps as well in terms of setting the environment and the atmosphere in which police officers are expected to behave and to operate.
Yes.
I think no less than the public would expect.
Yes. And I think one of the things that I found a little bit disturbing was the Detective Superintendent Hurley saying that he had had very little editorial control over his 2012 report, which meant that it had obviously been rewritten by a senior officer. And this was a similar story to what we'd heard with the Andrew Mitchell case. And what you want to know is that it's not just the serious and sensitive cases which end up with the IPCC, which we can have complete confidence in, but with all cases, because even if they're not serious and sensitive, for the individual whose case is involved in that, they want to know that that case is completely credible and they can have confidence in it. So just wondering what steps can be taken to make sure that that sort of thing doesn't happen going forward.
I think partly it is about culture and about the sort of atmosphere and environment in which officers are operating. It's about ensuring that officers have the full confidence to not just put forward their reports, but I would suggest to be able to point out if those reports are in any way changed, because it's important that the person who's doing the investigation is able to report on it and the findings do come out. That, again, is, as I say, is part of culture. It's part of about the code of ethics. But it's also about an environment and an atmosphere. And one of the things that I've talked about in the House and I'm looking at is the whole question of whistleblowing in the police, of giving greater confidence to officers to feel that they can identify when they have seen something wrong happening, when they do see examples of corruption. I should make the point that the vast majority of officers operate perfectly honestly and with integrity on a day-by-day basis. But, of course, when incidents happen where there is corruption identified, then obviously it damages the whole police force.
Mr. Winnick, sir, brief supplement.
You know a number of occasions, no one better than you, Home Secretary, when the Met in recent weeks and months has been in the news for all the negative reasons. Do you welcome the inquiry which this committee is going to undertake into the Metropolitan Police?
I welcome every inquiry that the Home Affairs Select Committee identifies, Chairman.
Thank you. Let us move on to, very quickly, there's going to be a vote, colleagues, on female genital mutilation. We've also got an inquiry into that, as you know. There have been some movements forward. The Royal College of Physicians and others have talked about the need to report FGM as soon as they see it. Do you think that it should be mandatory?
I think we need to look at the impact of the changes that have already been made. The Department of Health has made clear that they wish to see reporting of incidents of FGM when those are identified. I think we need to see how that actually comes forward and the impact that has.
But would you like to see automatic referral? There's a healthcare worker, they examine a young woman or a young girl and they find that they have been subjected to FGM. Do you think there should be an automatic referral?
What I would see, and I hesitate only because I'm always question the validity of legislation around some of these measures, but I think that it is important that somebody who identifies, as indeed I believe the Secretary of State for Health has said, that if somebody identifies somebody who they believe has been subject to FGM, that should be reported. I think it's important for a number of reasons, not just for the individual, but also, of course, so that we can better identify the extent to which people who have been subjected to FGM are here in the UK, and potentially, obviously, also identify those particular parts of the country perhaps where it may be more prevalent.
Thank you. I will suspend the session for the vote and then we will return as soon as we have a quorum. Committee back to order. We are quorate. We were just completing the section on FGM. Were you indicating, Home Secretary, that you thought that perhaps the law ought to be changed? Because we're, of course, witnessing the first prosecutions of individuals under the FGM law. But were you perhaps suggesting to the committee that once our inquiry was completed and once you've taken stock of the situation, you might have to look again at the law?
No, I was indicating, Chairman, I hope that we would. I would want to obviously see the impact of the changes that, or the encouragement that has been given in the Department of Health. I also hope I'd indicated that I think that it isn't always necessary to grab for legislation in some of these on some of these issues. So I believe that we will see from the action that has been taken. It will give us a greater ability to identify not just individuals who have been subjected to FGM, but also obviously to identify the trends and numbers and get a better idea of the extent of this crime that takes place.
Nicola Blackwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Clearly, it's very welcome that we are now having our first prosecutions, although it has taken me 30 years to get there. But we recently had Alison Saunders, DPP, in to discuss some of the issues. And at the same time, there was a report of some doctors who had expressed concern that these prosecutions would make it difficult for them to carry on their normal practice. And I just wondered if any of these concerns had come across your desk, because clearly there are reports of 66,000 victims of FGM with over 20,000 at risk. But according to the claims of this independent report, Dr. Katrina Erskine has claimed that she's never seen any victims who've actually been cut in the UK, and that she feels that this will inhibit gynecologists and midwives from doing their normal practice. This is the first time I've ever heard claims like this, and so I just wondered what response you would have to those comments.
Yes, I was. Excuse me. I was surprised to hear the comments that were made in relation to FGM, because I think I had hoped and thought that there would be a general desire to tackle FGM and to prevent FGM, and that's why we've seen the ministerial declaration being signed across government in terms of our intention and willingness to actually do what we can to protect girls from this abuse. It's why we are, in the Home Office, we're actually part funding a new study into the prevalence of FGM in England and Wales in order to try to ascertain the nature of the figures. The 2007 study suggested over 20,000 girls were at risk of FGM every year, which would lead to obviously a significant number who would have been subjected to it in the UK. Obviously, as I've indicated, the reporting that the Department of Health is requiring from acute hospitals will give us also a picture about the prevalence of FGM. But I would hope that everybody would recognise that this is an abuse. It's an abuse that we need to stop. As I indicate, I'm surprised to hear those sorts of comments.
But also, surely those who are conducting these investigations are properly trained to distinguish between FGM, which has specific traits, and normal gynecological procedures, which midwives and gynecologists should feel perfectly at ease to conduct in their normal practice.
Oh, indeed, and I would expect that it to be the case that people are aware of, and certainly are steps are taken to make sure that people are aware of exactly what the signs of FGM are, what is undertaken, and how this differs from other practices.
Okay. And there is specific evidence that this practice is happening in the United Kingdom.
I think it is true to say that there is a concern that it may be happening in the United Kingdom. One of the problems in this area is precisely that we don't have all the evidence and all the identification of the nature of the problem, such that we're able to make categoric statements about numbers and what is happening here as opposed to what is happening elsewhere. Obviously, we know there will be girls and young women who will be girls who will be taken abroad for FGM to be practised on them.
Yeah, okay.
Good. Let's turn to immigration and asylum. Are you part of the wealthy metropolitan elite that the Minister for Immigration was chiding? Those who wanted cheap tradesmen and services, but not the ordinary hard-working people of this country?
Well, I think the point the Immigration Minister was making, Chairman, was that when you have uncontrolled immigration, those that it impacts most on are those at the lower income scales, because what it does tend to do is depress wages at that end of the lower income scale.
Sure, but he was doing more than that, wasn't he? He was actually highlighting those who have people who are not of English origin working for them. You have a Brazilian cleaner. The Prime Minister's children's nannies are of Nepalese origin. The Deputy Prime Minister's got a Belgian employee. The Chief Secretary of the Treasury has a Portuguese cleaner. Indeed, Mark Harper had a South American employee. And now the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge have a Spanish nanny. What was the message he was trying to get out when he said that the wealthy metropolitan elite should not be indulging in these practices?
What he said, Chairman, and what I've already indicated.
No, you indicated the second point, which is the hard-working people.
No, the message he was getting out was that if you look at uncontrolled immigration, it has the greatest impact, not on those at higher ends of the income scale, but it has the greatest impact on those at lower end of the income scale, in terms of any job displacement and in terms of the impact that it has on lower incomes, because it tends to depress wages at the lower income end.
Did you
of the scale.
approve his speech before it went out? Because it appears that Downing Street didn't. It caught the Prime Minister by surprise.
I was entirely comfortable with what the Immigration Minister said.
So you'd approved it before it went out?
I was entirely comfortable with what the Immigration Minister said, and the point that he was making is the point that I've just made twice.
No, it's just that because he said that it had been cleared in the Home Office.
His speech had been cleared in the Home Office.
So you obviously saw it before it went out. Are we still sticking to the net migration at 100,000?
I think it is right to maintain that aim that we have as a government. I think it's important that we do. Obviously, the task of reaching that figure has now been made more difficult by the trends we've seen recently in EU migration, which has gone up in the last two sets of figures, and last two quarterly sets of figures. Main countries that have been sources of that EU immigration are countries like Italy and Portugal and Spain. But on those parts of the immigration routes into the UK where we've been able to make changes and able to bring control, then we've seen immigration falling, and net migration from outside the EU is at the lowest level since 1998.
So it's an aim now, as opposed to something that you hope you will achieve by next year, because as Mark Field said when he launched his organisation, you can't actually control the number of people who leave the UK, and you can't control EU migration. You can do all the rest, as you have done. The number of Indian students, for example, are down 30%. But the number of people who leave the country is completely out of your control.
Well, as Mark Field also said, Chairman, if I may quote, "I don't for 1 minute think that we should scrap this policy now. We have made it clear to the electorate, and we need to work towards this net migration figure in the run-up to the next election."
So when you come and see us next year for your last appearance before this committee, you'll be able to tell us that you met your targets, you hope.
I'm doing everything that I can, Chairman, to ensure that we continue to work towards that target.
Now, as we know, you're off to the Vatican, and as you know, Pope Francis is pretty big on compassion and forgiveness. Do you think that our immigration policy should allow ministers, in certain circumstances, to exercise discretion and to show compassion on individual cases, even though the rules are tough? And of course, we have some very tough rules that you've brought in, rightly so. But there should be those cases where ministers should be able to exercise discretion and allow people to stay for certain circumstances.
I think what is important, Chairman, is that the message we send in relation to our immigration rules is that we have a set of rules and we expect people to abide by that set of rules. There are a number of areas. There is one area in particular which is not about immigration, which is extradition, where, of course, I have removed the ability of the Home Secretary to exercise discretion in relation to human rights arguments and given that to the courts. But I think in terms of our rules on immigration, it's important that we have a system, that people understand what that system is, and that they understand that where we see that people have not been abiding by those rules, we take appropriate action.
Because we heard some powerful testimony last week from the mother of Yashika Bageerathi and her local Member of Parliament, David Burrows, who wanted to stay to complete her A-level examinations. but was marched off to Heathrow Airport from Yarlswood with 4 marshals, whereas we've just received figures that there are 10,600 foreign national prisoners who we simply can't get out of the country. Do you think that we overdo it sometimes in those individual cases because we have failed to act for whatever reason in removing all these foreign national prisoners? Because it's an awful lot of foreign national prisoners, is it not?
No, Chairman, we don't overreact in particular cases. What we do in whatever aspect of the immigration rules it is ensure that we are doing everything we can to make sure that those who should be removed from this country are removed from this country. And I recognise the concern that was expressed by people in relation to Yashika and her removal from this country. But she had, of course, come here as a visitor. She overstayed. Her case went through the courts, but I realised that there was concern about her undertaking her A-levels, and that's why we made arrangements with the British Council that she would be able to continue to undertake her A-levels in Mauritius.
So that is happening now. She's doing her... Order, please. So you, the Home Office, through you, have made arrangements for her to complete her A-level examination.
We were in touch with the British Council, and we made sure that it is possible for her. It's then a decision for her, obviously, as to whether she chooses to take up that offer that has been made available.
And what is happening to the rest of the family? Will they also be removed?
Well, their case obviously has to be looked at.
We'll leave that to the local MP to pursue that with you. Yasmin Qureshi.
Secretary, some time ago, the government passed legislation about the requirement of having £18,500 salary, or just over £18,000, for you to be able to bring your spouse into the country. In constituencies like me, in mine, Bolton South East, many people don't earn £18,000. They don't earn anything near to that amount. A lot of people are on minimum wage, but they are surviving without taking any state benefits. You have effectively deprived many people of their right to have a family life. Has the Home Office going to reconsider this particular provision?
Obviously, we took a decision that we wanted to look at the family route into the UK. We took independent advice from the Migration Advisory Committee about the level of salary threshold that we should set. We chose the lowest figure that they indicated. They indicated a range starting from 18,600 up to well over 20,000. We took that lowest figure obviously on the advice from the Migration Advisory Committee, and it was based on a simple view that we believe that if people want to bring somebody in to maintain a family life here in the UK, then they should not be doing so on the basis of recourse to benefits. They should be able to support themselves. And that was the income threshold that was proposed to us by the Migration Advisory Committee.
But the current rules already say that you can't bring in a spouse unless you are earning a reasonable amount of money anyway. I think it used to be certain figures of having so much money left over at the end of the month, I think £400 or something, which was something people were able to achieve. People on benefit were never allowed to bring their spouses or partners over in any event, and the spouses can't get British nationality or indefinite leave to remain unless the person who they're married to was earning a certain amount of money and not receiving any state benefits. So this provision didn't affect people who were receiving any state benefits to be able to bring their spouses or get them indefinitely to remain. This is people. It's affecting people who are working, not recourse to state benefit, but because their income may be about £12,000 a year or £13,000 a year, they are not being able to. And I've had a number of constituents who are in that situation, and it's not just people from the Commonwealth, but it's actually quite a lot of people who've gone on to other countries, like other European countries, and have met somebody there. They don't earn £18,000 because actually £18,000 in comparison to London is a lot of money in Bolton.
Home Secretary.
Well, we did look at this issue. We looked at the question of differential incomes across the country. The Migration Advisory committee did not advise that differential levels of income. They advised against setting differential thresholds throughout the country. And the point is that previously it's not a question of the difference between somebody who is only on benefits versus somebody who is earning. It's about the point at which people are earning such that they generally do not have recourse to any form of the benefit system, and that was the advice that we were given and the advice that we were taken. As you and other members may be aware, there has been a court decision which means that we are currently, for certain cases now, they are currently stayed while we await the result of an appeal against that court decision.
Well, that's right. And again, as a constituency MP, I've got a lot of constituents who are in that situation where their sort of appeals are pending, because I know there's been a judicial review in the Supreme Court. But of course, if that decision, we don't know how it may go, but ultimately the issue about eating that, I mean, just asking us for pleading with the Home Office that for a lot of my constituents that's a lot of money and they effectively can't bring their spouses over, and they're not people who are going to be relying on state benefits. So no disrespect to the Migration Advisory Committee, but I don't think they're dealing with real people who are in real situations, who are left in a situation they can't bring their
Home Secretary.
in.
Well, I recognise the passion with which you're putting forward the case of your constituents. As I say, we did look very closely at this, and we looked at the advice that we received, and obviously they evidenced that advice in the work that they did. And I think we took, as I said, we looked at the lower end of the lowest figure that they proposed rather than taking the higher figure. And obviously we wait to see what the court judgment is going to be. And I recognise also that some people have had their decisions, are having their decisions stayed at the moment while that we wait the determination of the appeal.
Very quickly, yes,
Right.
Mauritia.
And also recently the provision passed about the fact that you can have your British citizenship taken away from you if you commit certain offences or you're deemed to be a danger to society. That effectively creates two types of citizenship in this country and two types of citizens, because it's showing the British naturalised citizens are in a different category to those who perhaps have parents who were British. Doesn't that seem to be discriminatory policy?
Well, the policy is the ability to deprive somebody of their citizenship is already in existence. It's in existence in a set of certain circumstances, and obviously we are looking in the immigration bill to extend those circumstances. So, for example, at the moment, if somebody applies for citizenship on the basis of fraudulent documents, then it is possible to take that citizenship away. And I think that's right, because there is, if somebody is undertaking asking to become a British citizen, there are certain, obviously we expect them to abide by the rules and the laws that we have. It is also possible, obviously, to do that in particular circumstances where somebody has acted in a particular way, where they have access to another nationality. Obviously,
that's very helpful.
Looking to extend.
Thank you very much. We need to make some progress. Quick supplementaries from Mr. Ellis and Dr. Huppert, please, and then we must move on to terrorism.
Thank you.
Counter-terrorism.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Home Secretary, on the issue of the revocation of passports, there are a tiny minority of individuals who choose to become British citizens and then later act to or seek to threaten our security, subvert our values and laws, and perhaps even fight against our armed forces. It was said in the House of Lords last night that it would be perverse if such people, who, however tiny the number of them might be, who attacked our forces and terrorised our citizens could invoke our protection. Now, I understand that in the House of Lords last night they voted against this measure. Could I ask what your decision will be in view of that vote, and whether you wish to adhere to that policy?
If you could have as brief answers as possible to the remaining questions, I'd be grateful.
Right. And the answer to that is obviously I have to look at the nature of the debate that took place and consider what we will do when the immigration bill returns to the House of Commons. But I stand by the reasons why I wanted to invoke this new clause within the immigration bill, which is I think there is a very small number of people whose actions are such that I think it is right to deprive them of their citizenship. And what I was proposing to do was to return the legislation here to the position that it applied prior to the early 2000s, and to recognise our international obligations, to return us to we would still have been recognising our international obligations in doing that. Obviously, I have to look at what we intend to do when it returns to the Commons.
If I could just quickly ask about student immigration, which is an issue, obviously, that I'm particularly concerned about. And we all agree that we need to have controls, we need to clamp down on bogus colleges and bogus students. But Universities UK highlight that in 2012-13 they saw a 10% decrease in the number of non-EU international students studying STEM subjects in undergrad, and an even larger drop for taught postgraduate STEM subjects, which I think they're certainly very alarmed about. And there's been also a report from the House of Lords Select Committee on Soft Power. They have rather more interestingly titled select committees than we do, who are very concerned about the effects of the visa policies on UK soft power and call for students to be taken out of the standard presentation numbers. The Sixth Committee, Select Committee, to do so. Will you agree to their requests along with all the rest of us?
No, the reason why I've answered this question on a number of occasions in various forums...
No, but a quick explanation is fine.
The student migrants are within the international definition of immigrants. Because that is a definition of anybody who's staying here for over a year, and students by definition generally are staying here by over a year. There are some who come here for less than a year, and there's a separate route for them. Overall, since we came into office in 2010, the number of students from overseas students who have been coming to our universities has gone up.
Thank you.
Could you publish two numbers, the international standard and one without students?
No, we abide by the international standards, Dr. Hubbard.
Right.
That's what everybody else
publish
does.
Other numbers as well.
And we do.
And you have said that to this committee on a number of occasions, but Dr. Hubbard is very persistent, obviously, and is right to raise it with you. Two quick points from me. You just told this committee that provision had been made for Yashika to do her A-levels in Mauritius. I understand that this is not the case, and I wonder whether you'd look into that, because I think from this committee's point of view, this is the most important aspect of this, that she not be disrupted at this critical time in her career. And perhaps not now, because obviously, and not immediately, because you've got to catch a plane. But on the way to Rome, if you could ask one of your private secretaries to just look into this for this committee and let us have something in writing tomorrow, I'd be very happy.
I'm happy to let you have something in writing, Chairman. I did check this before I came to the committee. I thought it might be of interest to the committee. My understanding is that precisely that the British Council has made this opportunity available, and indeed that the Foreign and Commonwealth Office are today contacting Yashika's school at the request of the British Council, because they are concerned that if she doesn't take up this opportunity, then obviously time is slipping away.
That is very helpful. If we could have that tomorrow, that would be very helpful. Counter-terrorism, we've got a shorter period on counter-terrorism because I want to deal with JHA and I want the Home Secretary to go by 4:30, as I promised. Could I start about the number of British citizens going to Syria? The figure has been put to this committee during our inquiry into counter-terrorism as round about 400 people. We've seen examples of people about to board planes where their passports have been taken off them. What are we doing to stop so many British citizens feeling that they can make a contribution to the war in Syria, which clearly they can't, and then returning into our country and possibly indulging in terrorist-related activities?
Well, we're doing a number of things, Chairman. As you yourself have indicated, one of the things that we are doing, obviously, is the exercise of the royal prerogative, which is the removal of certain passports. We also are trying to encourage people to recognise that if they wish to participate in humanitarian aid for Syria, then there are other ways in which it is better for them to do that, that if they do go to Syria, then they may find put themselves at danger. And indeed, obviously, there is a danger, not just physical danger, but also potentially a danger of radicalisation and the impact that would have for people who return here. There will be those, of course, who are desirous of going in any case for perhaps other reasons than simply the issue of humanitarian aid. And as I say, we do have a number of tools available to us to discourage and disrupt travel.
Last week in the House, you put through, at least James Brokenshire put through, 3 new orders banning 3 new organisations, 2 in Egypt and 1 in Tunisia. But we still don't see Hizb ut-Tahrir on the list. And both the Prime Minister and members of this committee are very concerned that this organisation ought to be banned. Why has it not been banned so many years after the Prime Minister and others have expressed real concern about what it's doing?
Well, this is a matter that we continue to look at, Chairman. Obviously, we've looked from time to time at the evidence that is available. And as you've seen, when it is possible to bring a case to Parliament for prescription, then we do so.
But do you want to see it banned, as the Prime Minister does?
The Prime Minister made his views very clear. We look at this case of Hizb ut-Tahrir, and I say there are certain criteria which it is necessary to meet in order for prescription to take place. We do look from time to time at a number of organisations and whether they meet those criteria.
And the threat to this country, which you're very conscious of, you have to deal with on a daily basis, do you regard that as being on the increase or on the decrease, or the same as when you last came to report back to this committee in December?
I think what has happened, Chairman, is that the threat has become more diverse. And we see gone from a situation where there were a limited number of identified parts of the world where people were, for example, able to go and train and perhaps return to the UK wishing to do us harm. The number of places that people are going to has increased. The number one destination now for jihadists is Syria, which is why it is one of the key areas of concern that we have. And as we've indicated in your question and my answer to your first question in this part of the meeting, individuals who are trained in Syria may, of course, seek to carry out attacks against the West. So we have seen a diversity of threat, and that, of course, means that our security service and law enforcement agencies have to be able to meet that diversity of threat in the work that they do. And as I've indicated, we are taking action to dissuade people from travelling to Syria in the first place, but we will, of course, take what action is necessary to protect our national security.
And as yet, we still haven't found Ibrahim Magag and Mohammed Ahmed Mohammed. We're still looking for them.
Obviously, every effort is in place, Chairman.
Thank you. Dr. Hubbard.
Thank you. Secretary, I don't know if you've had a chance to see the ruling just today from the European Court of Justice, striking out with immediate and retrospective effect the Data Retention Directive. And whether you've had a chance to have a look at the effects on the current data retention regulations in the UK that implement them.
Obviously, I have asked for this to be looked at very carefully. I'm aware that the ECJ has made a judgment about the Data Retention Directive and has not suspended that judgment. Obviously, we will look very carefully at the full implications of that. But I think, Dr. Hubbard, you would expect me to do that carefully and properly rather than coming with an immediate answer to the committee.
Absolutely. It is surprising. It was a surprise that it wasn't suspended because the Attorney General suggested that. I've had some advice from the House of Commons Library which suggests that they say that since the legal basis has gone, the implementing regulations are invalid, and that would obviously cause some real concerns. Do you have, how quickly do you think you'll have an understanding of whether communication service providers are bound at the moment, and whether you have the legal authority to pay them for work which they do under the regulations and directive?
Well, obviously, as I say, we have to look very carefully at the full implications of this and make some decisions and judgments on the basis of those implications. The reason why I think this is obviously it's an important area is the reason that I have given to this committee and elsewhere in the past. Access to communications data is an important tool for our law enforcement and security services. And it is the case that communications data is obviously being used in, I think, every major counter-terrorism piece of work over the last decade, and well over 90% of organised crime cases. This is very important. It is about us being able to identify people who would do us harm and who would engage in serious and organised criminality.
The question has always been one of proportionality, rather than, I think, the principle whether this should happen. I don't think there are people who don't think there should be any communications data. But what should a communication service provider be doing at the moment when they aren't clear on whether they are legally allowed to retain any of this? And can you give them an assurance that you will continue to pay them for their work while there is this period of lack of clarity?
Well, as I've indicated, Dr. Huppert, I don't think it would be right for me to come with an immediate answer to this committee. I have to look at the implications of the judgment fully and properly and take decisions thereon.
Will you at least write to us when you have done that?
Well, I will undertake to give to this committee such information as it is possible for me to give to this committee, these being matters which touch on areas in relation to security.
But clarity of the law is useful as well.
Finally, on counter-terrorism, the committee is meeting with the Secretary-General of Interpol this evening. In our inquiry into CT, we've questioned the need for international organisations to assist countries that don't have the capacity to deal with the terrorist threat. The committee went to Kenya to look at the Westgate's shopping centre, and we heard evidence about the way in which the Kenyan government needed assistance. We know that the British government offered assistance throughout this period. Looking back at the last 4 years, and obviously this is a brief that you have clearly mastered, do you feel that there is a need for a more robust international approach? There's bilateral communications between countries, but organisations like Interpol and the United Nations, do you think they need to play a bigger role in the sharing of information for certain countries that face danger?
Well, I think, Chairman, that what is necessary, obviously national security is a matter for each individual. The national security is a matter for each individual state. As you've indicated, there are circumstances in which, obviously, intelligence can be shared and information can be shared. I mean, this is an issue which relates to not just the terrorism agenda, but obviously to issues like organised criminality as well. Agencies working together to ensure that we can maintain people's safety and security is an important part of the picture. I think what you're hinting at, I may be misunderstanding, what you're hinting at is an issue around the capacity building of individual states, which perhaps have not had that ability in the past. And obviously there may be some circumstances in which that is something which it is appropriate to be done on a bilateral or multilateral basis. For example, the United Kingdom and others are working in Pakistan to help support the processes of justice in relation to terrorism. So working with prosecutors in terms of training, being able to deal with prosecutions of terrorism. And so there is work that does go on both a bilateral and multilateral basis at the moment. And
you're happy with counter-terrorism staying with the Met rather than being transferred to the National Crime Agency at the moment?
I have indicated, Chairman, that there will be a review, and obviously I will make that review when I decide the terms and timing of that review. I will obviously ensure that Parliament is informed.
Thank you. Let us move on finally to Justice and Home Affairs agenda of the European Union and international issues. Mark Reckless.
Secretary, you received support from Dr. Huppert, but do you recall how many Conservative members spoke in your support of your package of opt-ins in yesterday's debate?
Yeah, I recall that sadly very few members overall in the House spoke in the debate yesterday. I'm pleased to say that the Justice Secretary did indeed speak in support of the opt-ins that we were putting forward, and indeed Dr. Huppert contributed to that debate as well. And as you yourself know, Mr. Reckless, because you were one of the contributors to that debate, there were a number of colleagues who expressed some misgivings.
Home Secretary, my recollection is that no Conservative members spoke in favour of it. You argue that the Lord Chancellor did. My recollection is he stressed that we'd exercise the opt-out, but when he was asked to give his view on the package of opt-ins you were proposing, he suggested we should speak to him later over a beer. Are you receiving similar support from the Prime Minister?
I have to say, Mr. Reckless, I think you are being quite careful and a little mischievous in your interpretation of the debate, the nature of some of the contributions of the debate that took place yesterday. I believe that it is absolutely right that as a government we should look to opt in to those measures which we believe to be in the national interest. And I believe on certain measures which are about law enforcement cooperation across borders, it is entirely right and proper, and the public would expect us to say that we wish to exercise the opt-in and we wish to ensure that we can continue the cooperation that we've been able to have so far on issues like extradition around the European Union.
But the Prime Minister has expressed very different views, at least in the past, with regard to the European arrest warrant.
I can assure you that the decision that was taken about the 35 measures that we wish to opt in was a decision that was taken across government with the full support of all in government, from the Prime Minister down.
And have you been privy to discussions between the Prime Minister and Linton Crosby on whether we will pursue these opt-ins?
I have to say, Chairman, that the question of whether or not we will pursue the opt-ins is a matter that I discuss with the Prime Minister and with the Justice Secretary. And we are at the Home Office, and indeed, obviously, officials in the Ministry of Justice as well, taking forward, as I indicated yesterday, the negotiations necessary
but not with
to make sure that we can bring. As I've indicated, I discuss it with the Prime Minister and with the Justice Secretary and obviously other ministerial colleagues.
Oh, no, you haven't answered my question, Home Secretary. Could I repeat another question I asked you yesterday? Have there been negotiations with those on the opposition front bench on whether they will support the package the government puts before the House, or does she believe that she has enough votes from government members to drive through measures to integrate this country into the European Union in a way we've never seen before?
What I believe in doing, Mr. Reckless, is putting the case to Parliament when the time comes. We had the support of Parliament last year to exercise the opt-out. The House of Lords also recognised the list of 35 measures. I will be putting, obviously the negotiations continue, in due course a package of measures will be put before Parliament for Parliament to consider.
Perhaps you can come back to the committee after the European elections.
I have every expectation that the Chairman will expect me to come back to the committee in the future.
If I could bring a bit of seriousness to this now. Back to Mr. Reckless's serious questions, which is, do you not really believe that it would have been best to have had a vote before you embarked on these negotiations? Do you not? You've seen the report of the 3 select committees, and we know you have enormous respect for the work of this committee because you've said so in the past. But we feel very strongly that a vote would have been the best way to give you the mandate to negotiate with your European colleagues. You still maintain that you'd like to get the package done first and then put it to the vote.
Yes, Chairman, and for a number of reasons. First of all, I think that genuinely, if you're going into a negotiation, you don't want to reveal an absolute hand beforehand. You need to be able to negotiate. And as I'd indicated previously, there is the potential for the list itself of the full 130 measures, of course, has potentially changed over time. So there are issues to be discussed with the Commission also on the interlinking of certain measures, and therefore I don't think that the firm rigidity of that would have been indicated by a vote would have been helpful in negotiations. I think actually one needs to be able to negotiate.
Let's just conclude with a number of individual questions that we'd like to ask you, and colleagues should, if they wish to indicate now. You know that the US Congress published in 2012 the Magnitsky Act, which provided for the publication of a list of those who've got visa bans. Given what's happening in Russia, specifically relating to the situation in Russia, do you not think it would be wise for us to publish a list of those individuals, as the US Congress has done, who are banned from entering our country?
Well, Chairman, if you're saying that, do you think it is right that the decisions that have been taken by the UK, and of course in terms of sanctions...
No, I accept what you've done, but I'm just saying what they've done in the US Congress is, through this act, I'm sure you've heard of it before, they allow their government to publish the list of those who are the subject of visa bans. The action you've taken, of course, has been quite right, but the names of those who are subject to these bans have not been put into the public domain.
No, Chairman, and we don't normally. We take a different approach.
We
don't normally put into the public domain.
Could you consider whether this is possible? Perhaps you could write to us about it.
Well, I'm very happy to write to you about the issue, Chairman. I mean, my view
generally
is that we do not. A certain number of visa applications are rejected every year. A certain number of people are not able to get visas on the normal course of events. Set aside any particular sanctions measures that are taken in the normal course of events, and I don't think it would be appropriate for anybody who is not able to come to the UK in those circumstances necessarily to to be on a public list.
Sure. Have you looked at what the US Congress has done? And is that why you come to that conclusion?
I have not made an in-depth study, Chairman, but if you
I'm not asking you to do an in-depth study. Home Secretary, I'm not asking you to do an in-depth study. I'm asking whether your officials have looked at it and considered it and found that it's wrong, because it's come to our attention, and this is an issue of interest, because obviously we're as keen as you are to keep undesirable people out of the United Kingdom. I'm not asking for an in-depth study. I'm just asking, have you all looked at this?
I'm very happy to write to you, Chairman, on the basis on which I have responded and to look at this issue. But, please, as I've indicated, this is a wider issue than just a particular small group of people. If you're going to publish anybody who has been refused a visa for entry into the United Kingdom, that has greater ramifications.
Now, you're going, I understand, to take part in a human trafficking conference in Rome. And we welcome all the work that you've done on this. You've made it very much a cause for your term as Home Secretary. Were you surprised when the APPG on modern slavery and Mr. Steve McQueen called for an overhaul of your current legislation? They felt it should be tougher so that it would try and catch more of those responsible for this terrible crime.
Well, obviously evidence is being taken from a number of parties in relation to the Modern Slavery Bill. We've had the work that Frank Field did with John Randall. We've also had the Joint Committee, which has been looking, Joint Committee of Parliament, that has been looking at the draft bill. And obviously we will look seriously at the proposals that they bring forward. I'm very keen to have a tough bill that enables us to catch the perpetrators of this appalling crime. I think by doing that, it's not only right to do that in itself, but also we can help prevent other people from becoming victims in future.
Thank you, Dr. Huppert.
Thank you. Just a very quick question about Telecommunications Act 1984, Section 94, which gives you quite broad powers. I'm not going to ask you about how you exercise those, because I know you can't answer those. When we heard from the Intelligence Services Commissioner, Sir Mark Waller, he highlighted there's no statutory oversight of that section, and that he felt that he probably ought to have some oversight. He said that it's an example of where he ought to talk about having his role expanded. The ISC hasn't looked at this either to date. Do you think it would be right for there to be some statutory oversight of that power?
Well, what I think is when we came into government, we did do a general review of oversight of the powers that are available in relation to counter-terrorism measures and intelligence agencies. Obviously, that's what led to a strengthening of the capabilities of the ISC in terms of what they're able to look into, and obviously the resources that they have available to them, the fact that they now have a slightly different relationship with Parliament, the makeup of the committee, the fact that they can now take evidence in public. All of these aspects came out of the review. Obviously, however, in general, as the background against which we operate changes, then you would, I'm sure, expect me to say that oversight is an issue that I'm continue to look at. But we have, as a government, already made a number of changes to general oversight, which I think are important and valuable.
And so, if Sir Mark formally asked the Prime Minister to extend his oversight to cover this, you'd be relaxed about that?
As I've indicated, I think it is right that we look at the general, continue to look at the general question of oversight if circumstances change, which merits that.
Nicola Blackwood is a final
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to get an update on the proposals for stop and search reforms. Obviously, the HMIC report came out last July, and their findings were quite worrying. They said half of forces did nothing to understand the impact that stop and search had on communities, and that the priority that chief officers gave to improving their use of stop and search powers has slipped since the Lawrence inquiry report in 1999. And obviously we've seen some proposals which you've had for reforming Section 60, but I'm not sure what stage we've got to now with moving that forward.
Yes, and in due course I will be bringing forward a package of proposals for people to see. We're just finalising the nature of those proposals. I mean, there are a number of aspects of this which we can look at. I think it's absolutely right that we have looked at stop and search. And whenever I meet, I met a group of young people, for example, who came into the Home Office from a school in South West London last week, who were talking about their own experiences of stop and search. and it just reinforces for me that we do need to make some changes in this area. So I will be bringing, I'm afraid I don't have a date when I'm going to publish the proposals, but I will be bringing proposals forward.
Working on it.
Yes,
finally, Home Secretary.
One more question, which was about the report on domestic abuse and the problems handling. Clearly, Thames Valley Police, we had a positive report from that, which I'm very pleased about, but most other forces did not. And I know that you said that you were going to chair a new group and require all the forces to have their own action plan. I just wondered what progress has been made with that so far, and if you have a timetable for how that's going to be delivered.
Yes, the action plan needs to be in place by September of this year, and I will, as I said, I will be chairing a group which will be looking at that issue. I think the results of that investigation, of that report by HMIC, were shocking. Although things have developed over the years, and there are a number of good examples of good practice, frankly, in too many cases, domestic violence was not being treated as seriously as it should be, and that's why I'm very clear to chief constables that they need to take action. And they need to take action urgently. And the timetable is that they need to have those action plans by September. I'm just looking to check that it's September, not October, but I'm fairly certain it is September.
Do you think perhaps you could just write to the committee with the timetable?
Yes, I'm happy to do so.
Thank you.
Finally, Home Secretary, for all the years I've been in this House, which is 27 years, and all the years you've been in this House, the Minister for Immigration's job has been held by one minister, and it's been a full-time job. Obviously, it's up to you to decide how to divide the portfolios. I don't know whether in conjunction with the Prime Minister or you make the decision yourself. And this is not in any way casting aspersions on James Brokenshire, who we think is a very competent security minister. And we welcome the fact that you abolished the UKBA and took most of that organisation into the Home Office. But we are worried about the fact that, having been a full-time job, with a huge amount of time being spent by ministers on individual cases. For example, the Yashika case must have taken hours and hours of ministerial time, I would imagine. We are concerned that one minister is handling both these portfolios. We appreciate that Karen Bradley has taken over some of the work. Will you look at this? Are you satisfied that this is the best way to deal with immigration when it is such a crucial issue and it's a very, very heavy workload?
Yeah, I am satisfied, Chairman. Obviously, if I had not been satisfied, I would not have given James Brokenshire the portfolio that I have done.
Mm. Well, that was done in emergency circumstances. You didn't know Mark Harper was going to resign, presumably. It wasn't planned for the future.
No,
in the past. He resigned, and you had to have a reshuffle, and you had to do it quickly. So it's not you didn't have time, did you?
A decision had to be taken,
yes.
But of course a decision was taken with proper thought for the nature of the portfolio.
Of course.
And that is the case. And obviously in relation to the security aspect of the portfolio, in a sense there's a different relationship between the Home Secretary and the Security Minister than other aspects of ministerial portfolios, because there is a much more hands-on role in certain aspects of that portfolio for the Home Secretary and responsibility for the Home Secretary.
And is the Lords Minister in your team, is he going to do more in respect of this work as a result of the reshuffle?
Well,
or does his portfolio remain the same?
In result of which work?
In respect to Mark Harper's departure and the arrival of...
what has happened is that aspects of work of the portfolio that James Brokenshire previously had have now moved to Karen Bradley. So the Lords Minister has stayed the same. As you know, Lords Ministers, apart from their immediate portfolio responsibilities, do of course have to be able to cover all aspects of Home Office business in the House of Lords.
Yes, but this committee would like to put on record its thanks to Mark Harper. He was an excellent immigration minister, and he always responded very positively to Parliament, and it's a loss that he's gone. But we will keep the portfolios and scrutiny of the Home Office under review, which we are obliged to do in respect of our work.
I'm always well aware, Chairman, that you constantly keep the work of the Home Office under review.
Well, we have now got you off 4 minutes early, so you can catch that plane, and I hope you'll have time to light a candle for the committee when you get to the Vatican. Order, order. We thank the Home Secretary and call in Sir David Normington.